Hi there, my analyzers. Guess what? Elizabeth Holmes has filed a motion requesting the judge throw out her convictions. It's called a motion for judgment of an acquittal. And I'll show you that motion. But first off, I want to invite you to a live stream where I'm going to give you my analysis of her motion. I'm going to call it an acquittal motion. I'm going to give you my analysis of her acquittal motion. So join me Monday night, June 6th at 6 p.m. California time. All right. So first off, I want to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to my channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Please help our community of analyzers grow. And thank you to many of you who voted on our community name. So before I get into that motion, I want to show it to you so you can read it. You can make your own analysis. So when you join me on Monday night's live stream with your questions, we can cover all that. All right. So before I get to the motion, before I show it to you, I just want to give you an update on the Balwani trial, her co-defendant. So Elizabeth Holmes was charged and convicted of 4 counts, right? 3 relating to defrauding investors and 1 relating to conspiring with Balwani to defraud investors. So Balwani is facing the same 12 counts. His trial starts again on Tuesday, June 7th. So it starts with the defense's case. So who are they going to be calling as witnesses? What evidence are they going to be putting on? And by the way, the case is scheduled out at this point, according to the judge's calendar, until July 7th or 8th. So if my math is right, that's 5 more weeks of trial. So sounds like they're going to be putting on a heck of a defense for Sunny Balwani. We'll see. So I'll keep you posted on that. All right. So another thing, I just want to let you know, just because a jury convicts Elizabeth Holmes, she has the right to appeal her convictions. We have a court of appeal. We also have the motion that I'm going to show you, which is the motion, I'll call it the acquittal motion. She can also file a motion to dismiss. There's many motions that can take place before the actual appeal to the court of appeal takes place. All right, now I'm going to cover all this in the live stream on Monday. All right, I'll fill you in. But yes, a judge can overturn a jury's verdict. And yes, Elizabeth Holmes does have the right, like every defendant, to appeal and to test the evidence that supports these convictions. All right, so let me just show you this motion to you. And by the way, please do subscribe, hit that like button. Do leave a comment, and please do join me for Monday night's live stream at 6 o'clock. All right, so let's take a quick look. I'm just going to scroll through the motion so you can read it, and you can make your own analysis, right? That's why I created this channel. I want to know what you think. All right, so here it is. It was filed last week. It's Ms. Holmes' reply in support of a motion for judgment of acquittal. So in other words, it's her reply. In other words, she filed the initial motion requesting the judge to grant an acquittal. The prosecutors filed an opposition to that. This is her reply to the opposition filed by the prosecutors. All right, so it's highlighting some of the arguments that the prosecution has made to support their case, to support the convictions. All right, so it's a motion for judgment of acquittal. So it's asking the judge to grant an acquittal. In other words, throw out those 4 convictions that the jury convicted Elizabeth Holmes of. All right, so I'm not gonna go through it extensively at this point because we're gonna deal with this as the live stream. So get your questions ready. But I just wanted to share this with you so you can go ahead and take a look at it. So basically the argument is the evidence is insufficient to support these verdicts. So it's insufficient to convict her on conspiring to defraud investors, which is count 1. And the evidence was insufficient to convict Ms. Holmes on the 3 wire fraud counts. And they break it down into their 5 reasons why the defense is arguing there wasn't sufficient evidence for a rational jury to find beyond reasonable doubt that Elizabeth Holmes is guilty of defrauding investors, right? Conspiring to defraud investors and to defrauding individual investors. They also make a claim for statute of limitations, which relates to the time period in which you need to file a claim. Otherwise, the claim can be thrown out. It's a time consideration. And I'll go over this at the live stream on Monday night. All right, you can go look through these table of cases if you want to read some of these cases. All right, what this is called a Rule 29 motion. All right, and a Rule 29 motion is the defendant's request for a judgment of an acquittal. All right, and they're saying the evidence is insufficient to sustain convictions on count 1. That's the conspiracy to defraud investors with Balwani. Count 6, 7, and 8. 6 relates to the count relating to investor Brian Grossman on behalf of the PFM Investor Fund. Count 7 was the DeVos family, the RDV Corporation. And count 8 was Daniel Mosley. So those are the 3 individual investor counts that she was convicted of. The other 3, the jury hung on, which, by the way, the prosecution has not dismissed those counts yet. So I'll talk about this also on Monday night too at the live stream. And by the way, the live stream will be recorded. So if you have better plans, you can watch the recording of the live stream later. Okay, and it says here, because no rational, as opposed to irrational, no rational juror could have found the elements of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud beyond a reasonable doubt on this record. And they're referring to the record, the testimony, all the evidence. They're referring to the record of the trial, all right? So this motion isn't going to be where the judge is going to be listening to additional evidence or additional witnesses. No, the judge is going to be making his decision based on the trial record. That means all the witnesses' testimony, all the evidence that was submitted, okay? And again, I'll go over this at the live stream on Monday night. You can read this factual background, which I thought was quite interesting on their portrayal of Ms. Holmes. So please go ahead and read this. And again, I'm neutral here. I'm just analyzing. I'm not advocating either side. So, some of you might start reading this and just toss it and go, this motion's a bunch of BS. Let me tell you, there's some interesting arguments in here. It's worth the read, okay? And I'm curious to see what your analysis is. So please do leave a comment and please join me for the live stream. Subscribe and hit that like button. Okay, so you can go ahead and read through this. And then I don't want to make this video too long. All right, procedural background. This is just letting you know that there were 12 counts. She was convicted on 4, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and by the way, this is the 3rd time. This motion is the 3rd time the defense has asked the judge to overturn, to throw out these, to throw out the counts, right? They made the first request for a judgment of acquittal, which is the Rule 29, after the government put on their case. Basically, at that point, Your Honor, based on what the government has presented, it's not sufficient evidence to support a conviction, right? Or to satisfy any of these elements. And then they renewed it again at the close of all the evidence. So before the case was argued in closing argument submitted to the jury, the defense made their second request that the judge move for an acquittal, right? And both times the judge reserved the ruling, which he can do. And now this motion is the 3rd request and the final request for the judge to make a decision. Basically, Judge, are you going to give us our judgment on acquittal? In other words, throw out, overturn the jury's decision, the jury's verdict. So, and you can read what the law is, a legal standard. It's not based on, jury can't speculate. There has to be sufficient evidence to support each one of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense is saying no, the prosecution has not met their burden. The jury was wrong, basically. Their decision, the verdict is wrong. There isn't sufficient evidence to support the verdict. You can go ahead and don't mind my little highlights here. I'm just, highlighting things I find interesting. You may find other things interesting. So don't mind my highlights. So they're saying here, here's their argument. no rational fact finder, in other words, no rational juror, could find the government proved conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt. And you can see here are their arguments. They're going into what the law is. You know, it has to be knowingly and intentionally defrauding, right? So, and establishing each one of the elements, and I'll go over this. And just because she's associated with Balwani doesn't mean that she committed a crime or engaged in a conspiracy. And they're saying, you know, there was only one text message to support this. And they don't have sufficient evidence to show that she knowingly was involved in this conspiracy or engaging in criminal activity. And they're saying the record contradicts the government's motive, that basically that they were trying to defraud investors because they were running out of money. You know, that's, I think, what they're claiming here and what the government argued, allegedly. Okay, and the second part is, you know, there's not sufficient evidence to support the wire fraud convictions either. Government failed to prove the elements beyond a reasonable doubt, and here they lay out all the arguments. And in particular, they break it down into their 5 reasons why there's not sufficient evidence regarding the proprietary analyzer. They're saying most of that was based on Erica Chung's testimony, and it's relating to the version of the 3.0 analyzer, not the 4.0 that Elizabeth Holmes was referring to, I think is what they're trying to argue here. Again, I'll get into this more in depth at the live stream, but I wanted you to take a look at this and make your own analysis. Okay, so financial stability is another one of the allegations that the prosecution said, you know, that Elizabeth Holmes represented to investors that Theranos was financially stable. And here the defense is pointing out, you know, based on the evidence, that she was making representations regarding future projections of the stability of finances, the stability of Theranos. And the investors understood that, according to the defense, is what they're arguing here. You can take a look at that. And they're saying that no rational jury could find that Ms. Holmes knew that Theranos would only generate modest revenues. The government didn't prove that she knew that. And then they go into the Walgreens partnership and whether or not it was stalled out, and whether Elizabeth Holmes represented to the investors that she had an expanding partnership, a growing partnership with Walgreens. And here, I think what the defense is arguing is that it wasn't stalled out. They were rolling out more stores. You can go ahead and read this. And they talk about lopsided evidence, mismatched evidence. You know, the defense is making some interesting arguments here. And here we go with the Department of Defense. You know, did Elizabeth Holmes represent that she had a profitable revenue generating business with the Department of Defense? Did Elizabeth Holmes represent that the Edison, the technology, was being used in the medevac in the field? Well, the defense said she didn't make any misrepresentations. You know, I think that's what they're arguing here. You know, bringing up certain arguments, saying that it was deployed in the battlefield based on AFCOM. Technology was deployed in 3 different countries. You can take a look at this. This is what they're claiming the evidence supports. Therefore, the jury was wrong, right? And the judge should step in and throw out those convictions, grant the acquittal. So you can go ahead and look at this. And then they get into some interesting arguments about prejudicial variance. In other words, the allegations that the government made in the indictment video, and I'll link it to you so you can take a look at the indictment video. Several allegations that the government made to support their claims of fraud. The defense is arguing here that they varied their case. In other words, they didn't lay out the allegations that they claimed in the indictment. They made a variance, a prejudicial variance. In other words, Elizabeth Holmes wasn't on notice as to what she was to defend herself of. based on what was written in the allegations. In other words, the government varied from what they alleged in the indictment video. Therefore, Elizabeth Holmes wasn't given proper notice. Maybe that's what they're claiming here, but we'll get into it at the live stream. Again, you can go ahead and read this. And then they talk about the sole recording, the investor call, and you can look at that investor video I did, the two that I did. One where I actually played Elizabeth Holmes, the actual calls, or seven calls, seven recordings of the call between the investors. You can take a look at that and see, listen to yourself, what representation she made. It's the same recording the jury heard. Okay, then you can go ahead and read this. And then whether or not Elizabeth Holmes represented that she was using Theranos technology or modified third-party analyzers. And they're saying here she made no secret, she didn't hide anything. The investors were aware that she was using modified commercial devices, and that was because of intellectual property of trade secrets. That's what they're claiming here. They didn't have to divulge it, I think is what they're arguing here. So you can go ahead and take a look at this. And then the validation of third parties, whether or not pharmaceutical and research institutions examined, used, and validated the technology, the Theranos technology. And again, that's an allegation in the indictment. The defense is arguing here that the government didn't prove that. They didn't call anybody from any research institution. There wasn't any witness from a research institution to say yay or nay. And they also varied and amended the indictment allegation, because the defense is claiming here that they only showed one slide where it was comprehensively validated by pharmaceutical companies, when that wasn't true according to the defense. And again, they're bringing up this prejudicial variance argument. Okay, and this is the end of it. So the last claim they make is statute of limitations. In other words, the government is bringing the claim too late. So the court should throw it out because they didn't file it on time. The judge has already ruled on this, and you can look at the footnote, but there's a 5-year statute of limitation. And because Elizabeth Holmes faced the third superseding indictment, meaning it was the third version of it, right? Same thing Balwani's facing, the same 12 counts, but it's an amended indictment. It's the third amended superseded indictment, okay? And they're claiming here that it violates the statute of limitations. In other words, the claims weren't made on time. The court has already ruled, you can look at here, footnote 12. The court has already rejected the statute of limitations claim. Okay, and then it's signed here by attorney for Elizabeth Holmes, and then it was served on the government. Okay, so what do you think? You know, she's asking the judge, and judges have done it, and I'll talk to you about that in the live stream. They have thrown out jury's verdicts. What do you think about these arguments in this motion? And please do join me for the live stream. For the live stream on Monday night, June 6th at 6 o'clock Pacific time, California time, I'll give you my analysis of what I think. I'm also going to talk about, you know, what is a motion for judgment of acquittal? What does that mean? What's the next thing that happens? You know, what is the standard? How does a judge figure out whether or not to grant this acquittal? You know, what does the law say about that? And I'm going to talk about the process. You know, she has the right, like every defendant has a right to appeal the conviction. In other words, to test the evidence, to test the decision, the verdict that the jury made. And again, we still have those 3 counts regarding the investors that the jury was hung on, that the government has not yet dismissed. So that's also interesting. So I'm going to talk about, you know, how the judge makes the decision. I'm going to talk to you about another interesting case. And here's a clue for you. Look at page 8. Look at page 8 and think about page 8. I think it's page 8, 9, and 10, you know, about what the law says, what the government has to prove. Okay. And this is why I encourage, when I work with lawyers, I encourage them, look at the jury instructions. tie the evidence to the jury instructions. Don't just argue it and expect the jury to figure out what the jury instruction says. We are guides. We're guides. We're explaining. You know, we're advocates, although I'm not advocating on either side here. I'm analyzing just like you. Okay. You know, we guide the jury. We explain what knowing means, what intentionally means to defraud. We explain what a conspiracy means. Okay. So that's all I got today. So thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you for subscribing. Please do subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. I'm curious to see what you think. I want to know what your question, if you have questions, send them ahead of time because I'm going to be working on this, preparing for our live stream on Monday night. So please do join me, and my apologies to those of you who live in different time zones. I'm sorry, but it's going to be recorded. You can watch it later if you don't want to stay up and grab a good cup of tea and join us. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Hit the like button, and please do leave a comment. And do join me for the live stream on Monday night. Have a nice weekend.